So I am a bit late on putting out these videos. I had intended for this series of videos to come out a lot sooner, and now with my work schedule, I am going to start grinding these out. So we are going to be covering all of the weapons. There are currently 20 weapons in Deep Rock Galactic. I'm going to try and put out all 20 videos tonight. At the very least, I'm going to do the first 5 videos for Gunner. So this is video number 1. Alright. So the first starting weapon that you get for the Gunner, this is unlocked by default, is the Lead Storm or the powered minigun. We're just going to call it the minigun for short. Examining the gun's stats, without any modifications, when you first get the gun, this is what you're going to have. The gun has no reload on it whatsoever. All of the rounds are in the gun to begin with. You have 2,400 rounds. Each bullet deals 10 damage per shot. Each bullet has a 20% chance to stun an alien that can be stunned for 1 second. The way it works is it has a spin-up time of 0.7 seconds before bullets come out. It fires 30 bullets per second, and your movement speed is slowed by 50%. It also takes 2 seconds for the gun to fully spin down, which means your rate of fire will be higher where you're at. So, the best weapon to pair with the minigun, in my opinion, between your two choices, is going to be the heavy revolver, being a slower rate of fire, harder hitting option. So let's start with that. Now we're not going to be covering any of the overclocks, so we're just simply going to explain what each modifier does and my ideal build for the weapon. Obviously, when you run overclocks, you are going to change how the gun performs. So this is just a basic beginner guide video on what you should be doing. We're not going to talk about perks. We're not going to talk about overclocks. So, it's very important to note that most of the time, DRG is going to force you to choose between either damage or ammo. So, prioritizing one over the other is going to be very important when you make a build. You also need to look at what abilities stack together. So, as an example of this, I'm going to show this off on probably the Driller, and the Sabata is the best example. If you have multiple modifiers for damage or ammo, you should first compare to see if one gives you a bigger bonus over the other. This high velocity damage rounds gives 3 damage per bullet, but these 2 only give 1. So it's important to understand that when you are making a build. I've explained this in a previous video. For right now, let's explain what our options are. So we have no conflicting damage modifiers. The only damage modifier that we have is, or conflicting modifiers where like they do the same thing. In tier 4, we have variable chamber pressure, and tier 2, we have high velocity rounds. High velocity rounds gives you 2 damage per bullet extra, whereas the variable chamber pressure gives you 15% damage bonus when the maximum stabilization has been reached. Essentially, the gun's rate of fire is maxed out. Now, that 15% is actually very important to understand. So, without taking this modifier, it is going to give you 1.5 damage. But the game rounds down on that. So, it's only going to give you 1 extra damage per shot. If you run this modifier, which gives you 2 extra damage, when you run this modifier, it will give you 2 damage per shot. But your damage here is only when the gun is fully stabilized. Now, we'll come back to that. I just want to mention that that is the only shift in difference. So your first tier is essentially going to be accuracy category. What do I mean by that? So we have this cooling one, which you would think that this cooling one right here, that doesn't affect accuracy, but it actually kind of does. You have your improved rate of fire and stabilization. This means that your rate of fire increases, so the time it takes for you to hit your maximum stabilization is faster. And this is just reduces your base spread. So this makes it so that instead of a larger reticle, you have a smaller reticule. This modifier right here increases the cooling rate of your gun. So it doubles how fast the gun's overheat meter goes down, and it makes so that cooling begins almost immediately after you stop firing. So, here's the thing. This modifier is very good in the beginning until you hit level 5, until you have the tier 5 upgrade, Cold as the Grave, where every kill cools the gun. That point, it doesn't necessarily matter. This makes it so that every kill that you get will cool the gun by 6 30%. Now, that may not seem like a lot. You actually can cool your gun faster by doing this. However, you maintain your stabilization benefit while you are running Cold as the Grave. So Cold as the Grave, in my opinion, is superior to this modifier. You have the increased rate of fire and the faster gyro stabilization. This gives you an extra 4 shots per second. I personally am not a fan of this because it means you go through extra ammo. I mostly run the increased accuracy just to have a tighter spread so that you're hitting more bullets in that spread. It's more damage and it's more ammo. It's less ammo being wasted and more damage overall. This is what I would run. But for your first choice, until you get to the later 2 rounds over here, I would recommend mechanic refrigeration. Alright, at tier 2, you have a very tough choice between expanded ammo bags or high velocity rounds. High velocity rounds gives you a bonus 2 damage per bullet. Oversized magazine gives you an extra 600 ammo. Now, for me, ammo is always going to be better than damage. That doesn't seem to make sense. There's a few times where I will go with damage over the ammo. However, I'm almost always going to pick extra ammo. I would rather not run out of bullets and have to use a few more bullets to kill certain enemies, because if I'm not killing most of the enemies and the person who is runs out of ammo, I want to have ammo. This is a conscious choice. I'm mainly going to be choosing ammo over damage in most situations when I make a build. Here, it's really a toss-up. It's either or. Both of these are pretty good. So far, the only trash modifier, in my opinion, is just that one, the improved motor for the rate of fire. You don't need the rate of fire increase. Alright, at tier 3, we actually have 3 very good options. So, these are the general options we're going to have to choose between on what I call special bullet effects. You're going to have the blow-through rounds, which give you penetrations. This means that each shot that you fire, if it hits an enemy, will continue in a straight line through that enemy. You have the improved stun. This gives you a better stun chance and a longer stun duration, essentially giving the gun more crowd control. Or you have armor break. This makes it so that your rounds do more armor break. Now, certain enemies have heavy armor on them. Heavy armor cannot be broken. This is things like Glyphid Oppressors and some of the Dreadnought variants. Or they at least have stages. Armor break makes it so that those guys are completely unaffected. They don't do anything against those rounds. You can't shoot through heavy armor. Medium armor is things that Praetorians, Brundle Tri-Draws have. That's the thicker looking armor that breaks off in chunks as you shoot it gradually. That armor break actually reduces the amount of damage that the alien receives by 50% until it's broken, at which point you can then get to the squishy weak spots. Most of the enemies you're going to encounter, like the Glyphid Grunt, is going to have light armor, which only reduces damage by 33% until it's broken, and you can break that fairly easily. Essentially, what Hardened Rounds does is it makes it so that you break armor much faster on harder to kill aliens so that you can begin damaging them more. I personally take this. Now, the penetrations is good. It's very good for clearing crowds, because if you have a very large crowd of grunts coming at you, or swarmers coming at you, each bullet will just pass through, but it's only going to pass through one enemy at a time. So you're essentially damaging 2 enemies per bullet instead of 1. I'm personally not a great fan of this, because it's only 1. I prefer to take the max penetrations on weapons that have either 2 or 3 on them, as opposed to that. In my opinion, the armor break is better because it is a high rate of fire, so you can very quickly break through the armor. On higher difficulties, if you're running like Elite Deep Dives, has 4, has 5 levels, I would recommend the blow-through rounds in that situation. Stun is good for crowd control, so you're going to get more stuns off, and they're going to be longer. As a note, if you stun an enemy, it knocks them out of their attack animations, and it puts them still for a second so you can get more damage in. This is good against enemies that are far away from you and encroaching fast. This is another good option that's good for higher hazard difficulties if you are playing very mobile. However, the minigun slows your movement speed by 50% when firing it, so you're not really getting out of a situation. So unless you are using it in order to try and get to a supply drop, or you're using it with the dash perk to try and just like dash away faster, I would not recommend the stun perk. I would recommend either the blow through rounds or the harden rounds. So then we have what I consider to be the trash tier. These two are actually trash tiers. There are actually some very good options. So what you have, well, very good options, I mean you have like one option. So for tier 4 we have the variable chamber pressure. What this does is when the gun is fully stable, which means it has reached its max rate of fire, the damage is increased. We explained this already. I'm not a big fan of this. We have the magnetic bearings, which the gun's spin down time is increased. This means that you will maintain that stabilization effect for longer after you've stopped firing. Not a fan of this one at all. I think this is garbage. I would not run that. And then we have charge speed, which what this does is this reduces your spin up time. So your spin up time before bullets begin leaving the gun actually goes down. This is the one I recommend. While the bonus damage can be nice, what it means is that when you finally stabilize, you're doing an extra quarter of a bullet damage to every bullet. This means I get bullets out faster. I want bullets out faster. So this is like a no-brainer right here in this tier. This is one of the few no-brainer ones. In your last tier, these modifiers are usually designed to change how the gun functions completely. They're like mini overclocks. So we have hot bullets, we have cold as the grave, and we have aggressive venting. Now, 2 of these are fire-based because some of the secondaries, primarily for the Bulldog revolver, have to do with burning targets. And now, I'm not a fan of both of these. Aggressive venting makes it so that when the gun overheats, everything around you burns. It shortens the downtime on an overheat. Normally when your gun overheats, it overheats for about 4 seconds if I remember. So that's 4 seconds where the gun is not usable, and it completely goes down in terms of spin time and spin up time. So it's basically like a factory reset. I personally do not like going into that overheat. Now what this does is it shortens that period to 2 seconds and does great fire damage around you. I'm not a fan of that because it also means I can't use my gun for 2 seconds. Now the intended purpose of this is to switch into your Bulldog and use something and use that effect. It also has a short radius around you. This is I forget if it's a 2 or a 4 meter radius around you, which is a lot shorter than you would think. This is the type of thing that if you get swarmed and you're low health, you would intentionally do this. You want to try and avoid being in that situation. The other choice you have here is that when the heat meter on your gun is in the red, all rounds that are fired will burn the damage. That means they will do 50% of their damage as fire damage. But, here's the thing, that only affects your gun when it is in the red meter, not orange, red, which means your gun's about to overheat. So you have to have a very careful trigger finger to stay in that range. Personally, I don't like running that risk. I run cold as the grave. The way this makes it is that every kill that you get will cool the gun by 6% of the maximum overheat. That may not seem like a lot, especially when you have to dump a lot of bullets into an enemy in order to kill them in the case of things like Praetorians or Glyphid Grunt, which part of the reason why I run armor break rounds. I love armor break rounds. That's the thing I primarily run out of the 3 specials. I usually am going to run the armor break over the blow through, especially if the gun doesn't have great armor break. If the gun has decent enough armor break, then I'm generally going to run the blow through rounds instead. But cold as the grave, in my opinion, this is probably the best modifier you can run. And when you get access to this modifier, you no longer need to run the magnetic refrigeration. The reason for that is that you can just keep holding down the button, and every kill will cool the gun. Now, this works against Nemesis swarmers, this works against regular swarmers, anything small as well will affect it. Not by 6%, it's scaled to the enemy. So for example, Praetorians are worth 10%. If you look at the swarmers are only worth like 1 or 2%, but it essentially means you can keep the gun on target and just keep firing and firing and firing. If you combine that with the reduced spread, this gives you a lot of accuracy at long range when you finally get the gun fully stabilized. Doesn't make it a sniper tool, but it does make it very good. So, the basic modifier that I would recommend this early on, then switch to this. Either of these options are very good. The armor break or the max penetrations, your preference on that. Lighter barrel assembly is a must-have. And cold as the graves is my choice unless you're going to be running another modifier. We're not covering overclocks. I'm just simply putting my build back on for what I normally run. So I'm good to go. So, this has been my video for the minigun. Thank you for watching. Have another video in a sec.